Welcome to the Neurophilosophy Hub podcast channel.
Glad to be here.
Today we're doing a deep dive into something that, well, it touches so many lives, but often stays in the shadows. Mental health stigma. Just think for a second, maybe about a time you or someone you know hesitated, hesitated to share what was really going on inside.
Yeah.
What is that hesitation about? What are those unseen forces making it feel so risky?
It's a really important question.
That's what we want to explore today. And if this resonates with you, we hope you'll subscribe and maybe click that bell notification. It helps you stay connected for future deep dives.
Absolutely.
So where do we start with stigma? How do we even define it?
Well, I think it's helpful to look at it on two main levels. They're connected, of course.
Right.
First, there's what we often call public stigma.
Right.
That's, the stereotypes, the prejudice, the discrimination we see out there in society directed at people with mental health challenges.
The external stuff.
Well, exactly. But then there's self-stigma. And this one is, well, arguably just as powerful, maybe even more personally damaging sometimes.
Self-stigma, how does that work?
It's when someone takes those negative public attitudes, those stereotypes, and actually starts to believe them about themselves. They internalize it.
Wow. So it's not just worrying about what others think?
No.
It becomes what you think about yourself.
Precisely. It gets woven into your own self-perception, your sense of worth.
Okay, so this silence around mental health, this reluctance to talk, it feels so ingrained. Where does it actually come from? What are the roots?
That's a great way to put it, ingrained. The roots are definitely deep, often tied to our cultural and social conditioning.
Oh, so?
Well, take many Western societies, for example. There's often a huge emphasis on individualism, right? Hyper-independence, constant productivity.
Yeah, always needing to be on.
Exactly. So experiencing mental health struggles can get framed, unfortunately, as a kind of personal failing, like you're not strong enough, not keeping up.
That pressure is immense. Just push through, don't show weakness.
Absolutely. It's a very common message. Then if we shift perspective a bit, think about some more collectivist cultures, perhaps some parts of Asia or the Middle East.
Okay.
The idea of family honor can be incredibly influential.
Ah, right.
So an individual's mental health challenge might be seen as reflecting poorly on the whole family.
So there's pressure not just for yourself, but for the group?
Huge pressure. It leads to secrecy, trying to avoid bringing any kind of shame or negative attention to the family unit.
That adds another layer of complexity entirely.
It really does. And we also can't ignore gender conditioning. In many environments that are coded as masculine, showing emotion, expressing vulnerability, it's often heavily discouraged.
Yeah, the man up sort of thing.
Exactly. Or being called too sensitive. These phrases actively teach people, particularly men but not exclusively, to suppress feelings.
So it becomes a learned behavior.
Totally. Like unspoken rules. Don't talk about feelings. Don't ask for help. Just push through it.
It's like we learn to build these emotional walls very early on.
Yeah.
And behind those walls, there's this fear, right? Fear of judgment, of what happens if you do show vulnerability.
That fear is incredibly powerful, and there's actually a neurological basis for it.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, our need for social connection, for belonging, it's fundamental. Research, particularly in social neuroscience, shows something fascinating.
Okay.
Experiences of social rejection or judgment, they actually activate similar brain pathways to physical pain.
Physical pain.
Yeah. Areas like the anterior cingulate cortex light up. So that fear of being seen as, unstable or weak or just being misunderstood, our brain can literally process it as a threat, similar to physical danger.
Wow. That really puts the intensity of that fear into perspective. It's not just in your head.
Not at all. Choosing silence in that light can feel like a genuine self-protection strategy.
And that connects right back to the self-stigma you mentioned, that internalized shame.
Exactly. Shame is such a potent, corrosive emotion. Brené Brown talks about this a lot.
Yeah, her work is incredible.
She points out that shame needs three things to really grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment.
Secrecy, silence, judgment. Makes sense.
So when society is judging and you keep it secret and silent, shame flourishes. People internalize those negative messages.
And they become that harsh inner critic.
Precisely. That voice saying things like, I'm just too much, or I'm not strong like everyone else, or if I ask for help, they'll think I'm broken.
Awful things to tell yourself.
Incredibly damaging. And this kind of self-talk, it leads to this sort of emotional paralysis. It stops people from seeking help because they're afraid of confirming those terrible inner beliefs.
It's like a vicious cycle. The worse you feel, the more you believe the shame, the less likely you are to get help.
Exactly. And that ties into emotional suppression, too.
How so?
Well, think about it. If, growing up, your feelings were consistently dismissed,
Like, stop crying or you're being dramatic.
yes, or toughen up, all those messages, they teach you that your emotions aren't valid, maybe not even real to others.
So you learn to just push them down.
You learn to suppress them, ignore them, hide them. And neurologically, some research suggests this isn't benign.
What happens in the brain?
Well, it might be linked to things like increased activity in the amygdala, that's our threat detection center,
Okay.
and maybe decreased regulation from the prefrontal cortex, the part involved in emotional control and reasoning.
So the emotions don't just vanish.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They often manifest physically or emotionally as chronic stress, maybe anxiety, depression. They have to go somewhere.
So this whole web, the silence, the stigma, the suppression, a cost is much bigger than just delaying treatment, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The psychological cost is immense. It goes way beyond just not getting help quickly enough.
What does the research show there?
Well, there's a pretty consistent link between internalized stigma and, well, a whole range of negative outcomes.
Such as?
Lower self-esteem, which makes sense if you've internalized negative messages. Right. A significantly lower likelihood of actually seeking help because of that shame and fear.
Yeah.
And tragically, studies also show correlations between internalized stigma and increased suicidal ideation.
That's incredibly serious.
It is. And even for people who do get into treatment, higher internalized stigma can sometimes predict poorer treatment outcomes.
Wow. So the stigma itself hinders the healing process.
It can, yes. Yeah. And that World Health Organization statistic you sometimes hear.
The one about how many people don't seek help.
Yeah, that nearly 2/3 of people with a diagnosable mental disorder never seek professional help, largely due to stigma and discrimination.
2/3. That number is just staggering. It really highlights the scale of this problem.
It really does. And it shows that vicious cycle we talked about.
Explain that again.
You're suffering, but you keep silent because of shame or fear.
Okay.
The silence often makes the symptoms worse over time.
Right.
Worsening symptoms can lead to even greater shame, more feeling of being different or broken, which then leads to further withdrawal, more isolation, reinforcing the silence. It just feeds itself.
Breaking that cycle feels crucial. But how? It seems so entrenched.
It is entrenched, but it's not impossible. It requires shifts on multiple levels, not just big societal campaigns, but changes in how we talk, how we think, how we relate to each other.
So normalizing the conversation, but genuinely, not just surface level stuff.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond like generic, it's okay to not be okay slogans, though those have a place.
What does that deeper normalization look like?
It might look like being a bit more specific, a bit more vulnerable in safe contexts.
For example?
Instead of just saying, I had a rough day, maybe if it feels right with the person, saying something like, actually, I'm noticing I've been feeling way more anxious than usual lately. I think I might need some support.
That takes courage.
It does. Or even sharing, this situation has been really heavy emotionally for me. Just want to say, you're not alone if you're struggling with something similar too.
So being specific and also extending that understanding outwards.
Yeah. That kind of genuine disclosure, it actually creates safety. It gives other people permission to be real too.
It chips away at the silence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a big part of this is also internal work. We have to challenge the stigma within ourselves.
The self-stigma we talked about earlier, how do we do that?
Well, ideas from things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, can be really useful here.
Okay.
First step is just noticing those automatic negative thoughts, becoming aware of that inner critic.
Recognizing when it pops up with I'm not good enough or I'm broken messages.
Precisely. Then you have to question those thoughts. Are they actually true? Are they based on facts or just feelings and old messages?
Challenging the narrative.
Yes. Ask yourself, would I say this to a friend I care about who was going through the same thing? Usually the answer is no.
That's a powerful question.
It is. Then the final step is to consciously reframe the thought. Find a more balanced, compassionate, and realistic alternative.
Like the example you gave earlier.
Yeah, like changing needing therapy means I'm weak into something like getting help actually shows strength and self-awareness.
It's like retraining your brain slowly.
Exactly. It takes practice, consistency, but over time, you can start to rewire that internal narrative.
And you mentioned some specific therapy approaches that tackle shame directly?
Yes, there are some really helpful modern therapies. For instance, internal family systems or IFS.
IFS.
IFS views that inner critic, the voice of shame, not as you, but as a protective part of you. It tries to understand its positive intention, even if its methods are harmful now.
Interesting. Understanding its function.
Exactly. Then there's compassion-focused therapy, CFT,
CFT.
that focuses directly on building self-kindness, activating the brain's soothing systems to counteract shame and self-criticism.
So actively cultivating compassion for yourself.
Yes. And trauma-informed therapy is also crucial here.
How does that fit in?
It recognizes how past experiences, especially trauma, can be huge sources of shame. It creates a safe space to validate those experiences and allow people to speak their truth without re-traumatization.
It sounds like all these approaches share a core message.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about separating the person from the struggle. The message is, you are not your diagnosis. You are not your pain. You are whole underneath it all.
That feels incredibly important for healing, separating self from the struggle.
Absolutely vital. And that connects directly to the language we use.
How we talk about it matters.
Immensely. Both how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to and about others.
So choosing our words carefully.
Yes. Actively choosing more compassionate, less pathologizing language.
Can you give some examples of reframing that language?
Sure. Instead of thinking or saying, I'm broken, maybe just try, I'm human and I'm healing.
Okay. Shifting from damage to process.
Exactly. Instead of, I'm crazy, perhaps, I'm having a really hard time right now and I'm working on it.
Acknowledging difficulty without the label.
Yes. Or swapping I'm weak for something like, I'm doing my best with what I've lived through, or I'm navigating a challenge.
It's subtle, but feels powerful. It changes the whole frame.
It fosters compassion for yourself, and when you practice it for yourself, it naturally extends to how you view others too.
That makes sense. And you also mentioned creating safe microenvironments. What did you mean by that?
Just that, breaking the silence doesn't mean you have to suddenly tell everyone everything. That can feel overwhelming and even unsafe.
Right.
So start small. Create pockets of safety. Maybe it's just one trusted friend you can be really honest with.
Okay.
Or finding a therapist who creates that non-judgmental space. Or even a supportive, moderated online group or forum.
Find your safe starting point.
Exactly. Because, as the saying goes, safety is where shame goes to die. When you experience being heard and accepted without judgment, even by one person, it starts to dismantle the power of that shame.
Building those connections where vulnerability feels possible, even if just a little bit at first.
That's how it starts.
And finally, you touched on the bigger picture, the societal role. It's not all on the individual.
Definitely not. While individual actions are powerful, we need broader cultural shifts too.
What would those look like?
Things like comprehensive mental health education in schools, starting young. Normalizing these conversations early.
Yeah, destigmatizing from the start.
Better access to care through employers, through community programs, making it easier and more affordable to get help.
Reducing barriers.
Absolutely. More responsible and inclusive representation in media, showing realistic portrayals of mental health challenges and recovery.
Moving beyond harmful stereotypes.
Yes. And policy changes, too, protecting people from discrimination in housing, employment, based on mental health status.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It has to be. True, lasting destigmatization requires change at the cultural level, not just individual effort, though that's where it often begins for many of us.
This has been such an insightful deep dive, really illuminating how stigma works on all these levels, societal, personal, internal.
It's a complex issue, but understanding it is the first step.
And you've given us some really concrete, hopeful ways to think about breaking that silence, both within ourselves and, in how we connect with others. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It was my pleasure. It's such an important conversation to keep having.
It really is. Today's deep dive, I think, really reminds us just how heavy that silence around mental health can be, often causing more pain than the struggles themselves. Hopefully, understanding the roots of that silence and seeing these steps we can take feels empowering.
I hope so. Small steps can make a big difference.
Thank you again for joining us on the Neurophilosophy Hub podcast channel. And to our listeners, if this discussion was valuable for you, please do subscribe and click the bell. That way you won't miss our future explorations into, well, the fascinating complexities of the human mind and experience.